There's a group of people who exist in a psychological blind spot. They remember life before the internet, but they also remember creating their first email address. They grew up with rotary phones, but they adapted to smartphones without missing a beat. They're what researchers began calling Xennials around 2014, a micro-generation born roughly between 1976 and 1985. And here's what makes them fascinating. They experienced a complete cognitive shift during the most formative years of brain development. We're not just going to talk about what Xennials remember. We're going to explore how those memories shaped their psychology, using research from neuroscience, developmental psychology, and behavioral economics. Because this group didn't just live through change, they were rewired by it. Let's start with the brain. According to research published in Nature Neuroscience, the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for impulse control, complex decision-making, and adaptability, continues to develop well into your mid-20s. Now, here's where timing becomes destiny. If you were born between 1976 and 1985, your prefrontal cortex was still in its high plasticity window when the digital revolution hit. You weren't a child, so you weren't simply absorbing technology as your default reality, but you also weren't yet 30, so your brain was still flexible enough to adapt. Psychologist Dr. Jean Twenge, author of iGen, points out that most generations grow up in one technological paradigm. Xennials, however, lived through a paradigm shift mid-development. That means you learned analog patience as a child, waiting for letters, TV schedules, and payphones. But you also developed digital fluency as a young adult, adapting to instant communication, search engines, and social platforms. This creates what cognitive scientists call cognitive flexibility, the ability to switch between different mental frameworks depending on context. And Xennials have it in spades. Let's zoom in on one specific experience, being unreachable. If you're a Xennial, you remember what it felt like to leave the house and simply not be found for hours. No texts, no tracking, no just checking in. Your parents trusted you to come home before dark. Your friends trusted you to show up at the park at 4 p.m. without confirmation. Psychologists call this high-trust socialization, and it has real effects on development. A 2018 study in the Journal of Child Psychology and Psychiatry found that children who experienced unsupervised time developed stronger self-regulation skills and emotional resilience. They learned to solve problems without adult intervention. They learned to tolerate uncertainty. But here's the twist. Xennials didn't just have that childhood. They also became adults in a world that suddenly demanded constant connectivity. So, what happens when you combine high-trust independence with hyper-connected adulthood? You get someone who can be alone without feeling lonely, who doesn't panic when someone doesn't text back immediately, but who also understands the social expectations of digital responsiveness. That's not nostalgia, that's a psychological skill set. Now, let's talk about memory. Research on autobiographical memory shows that human brains are designed to edit the past. We don't store everything. We keep what matters, and we let the rest fade. This is called memory consolidation and reconsolidation, and it's essential for mental health. It allows us to reframe painful experiences. It lets embarrassing moments soften over time. It gives us the freedom to grow. But here's what changed for Xennials. You grew up in a world where your memories were yours. That awkward phase, that heartbreak, that night you'd rather forget. It existed only in your mind and in the stories people told. Then, in your 20s, social media arrived, and suddenly, memories became documented. Psychologist Dr. Pamela Rutledge calls this the digital tattoo effect, where past versions of ourselves remain permanently visible, searchable, and often out of context. For Xennials, this creates a unique relationship with identity. You remember what it felt like to be forgiven by time. But you also learn to navigate a world where time forgives nothing. That tension shapes how you present yourself online, how you judge others, and how you process your own history. Now let's move from memory to money. If you were born between 1976 and 1985, you likely entered the job market or early career years right around the 2008 financial crisis. And this isn't just bad luck, it's a developmental turning point. Research in behavioral economics and developmental psychology shows that economic conditions during young adulthood have lasting effects on risk tolerance, career decision-making, and attitudes towards savings and security. A study from the National Bureau of Economic Research found that people who graduate during recessions earn less for at least a decade and often carry a scarcity mindset forward, even after their finances improve. For Xennials, this means you're adaptable, but also financially cautious. You're willing to take risks, but you always have a backup plan. You value stability, but you're not afraid to pivot. This is the psychological fingerprint of someone who built a career during economic collapse and survived. Let's bring this together with a concept from linguistics, bilingualism. Studies show that bilingual individuals often develop better executive function, the ability to switch tasks, filter distractions, and think flexibly. Now, apply that to technology. Xennials are technological bilinguals. You speak analog and digital fluently. You can read a paper map and use GPS. You can write a handwritten letter and draft a professional email. You can have a deep conversation without phone checks and collaborate remotely across time zones. This isn't just a party trick. It's a form of cognitive reserve, the brain's ability to adapt and problem solve across different environments. And in a world that keeps changing faster than ever, that flexibility is becoming one of the most valuable psychological assets you can have. So, here's what the research tells us. Xennials aren't just caught in the middle. They're psychologically equipped to navigate uncertainty in ways that single-paradigm generations often struggle with. You remember what was lost: patience, privacy, presence. But you also embraced what was gained: connection, information, possibility. You're not nostalgic. You're not lost. You're bilingual in the languages of two worlds. And in a time of rapid change, that might be the most useful mindset of all. If this video resonated with you, if you felt seen, consider subscribing. I'm creating more deep dive content on the psychology of generations, identity, and change. Until next time, stay curious.